So, what did the boomers teach us? Well, they taught us that their generation can ignore all younger generations, that they can ignore a new nation for 11 years as national narcissists. They showed us how greedy they are when it comes to family and how weak their family is when it comes to family continuity. So they're more liable to uh, pad their wallet than to keep their family together, just like your modern masculine feminists. So the problem is, hey, they raised children and they raised women to be the way they are today. That's why family and relationships have collapsed, and fatherhood is a thing of the past. As leader of the free world, I haven't seen my son before. I haven't seen my boys for 7 years. So now I'm raising all the adults. I'm teaching you the foundation of America after it ended. And I'm raising you as adults since nobody really raised you, right? Your mother likely got rid of your father for that child support extortion money and really didn't raise you right. Uh, so Americans raise their children to be psychopaths who are greedy, right? Essentially, they're out for themselves. They want a fat bank account. They want to be famous, and they no longer care about right and wrong. A foreign power has taken over America after it's ended, and I'm teaching you why it ended. But the idiocracy doesn't want to hear why their country ended as national narcissists. They're going to violate the First Amendment, the first thing you tell an American that their country ended. So they're too far gone. You can't reach them. You're not going to be able to reach an American to tell them why. Although I can in a video, right? Failure to uphold the right to life, America's entire duration. You have an unalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what happens when Americans don't understand or uphold the right to life? When they have things like lethal force by police, abortion, and execution, it shows they didn't understand America's founding document. Well, this easily allows the smart guy to alter or abolish the U.S. government itself. That's why Benjamin Franklin said it's a republic if you can keep it. That's a big if. If you're Butterfingers and you don't uphold basic rights like everyone in the idiocracy the last 2.5 centuries, well, hey, I can alter or abolish the U.S. government. But you don't notice because the boomers are full of themselves. They want to be famous and popular, even if they don't understand the foundation of America and the basics. So they don't know that the majority actually wants the smartest to lead. The boomers didn't actually care about what the democracy wanted. They had phony elections. A dog and pony show, it's called in Pentagonese. So what you have today is ruled by the smartest and a no-ocracy republic. If any group at random will vote, they'd prefer the smartest over the most popular. But every government has incentive to hide that from you, to keep their power, to keep their national continuity. That's what your phony pandemics are really all about, a desperate attempt to keep a government's power after it's ended, essentially, right? So there's a scramble to do that, to have a phony national emergency like you saw in 2000, right? So if you have a foreign power that takes over DC like this and tries to take over the world, with the deep state creating phony nations like Ukraine to weaken Russia to get the big players out of the way, well, that's no good. That could put American lives in danger, right? So that's why the founders didn't want you to have foreign powers bribing all of Congress like we see today. Everyone but Thomas Massie essentially is compromised by a foreign power. That any TikTok live can tell you when they have to guess which foreign power took over DC after America ended. So Israel took over D.C. through gerrymandering, through blackmail with Epstein, and intimidating the president with the golden pager as a gift. So that shows that the boomers can be manipulated. The boomers can be bribed. The boomers can be blackmailed. They can be intimidated by a foreign power. So, what is this? That's treason by American standards under 2331. So, when they do this and they're aiding an enemy to the United States, well, we call them an enemy because they attacked the USS Liberty, who took out JFK, really. You get to the bottom of it, and, he didn't want to give Israel the atomic bomb. Right? You try to make them register as a foreign agent and see what happens to you. So that's kind of what Thomas Massie is doing today. Right? So that could be dangerous for him. Look what happened to Charlie Kirk when he changed his tone as a government actor when he talked about Israel. It's as if to say, hey, America, your First Amendment doesn't matter anymore now that the USI, the United States of Israel, is running the show. Right? So it doesn't. Everyone on TikTok will argue, well, it's a private platform. Right? You don't have freedom of speech here. Right? So that's called moderator narcissism. Everyone likes to abuse their power, like the Stanford prison experiment, and they get a high off of muting and booting others. Or the messenger in the conversation, somebody who's smarter than them, perhaps, or somebody who's rude. Or the new government, who tells them something they haven't heard before, which is black sheep information. Hey, that's unusual. I don't like hearing things I haven't heard from before, right? So if I tell you your country ended 11 years ago, that's black sheep information to the NPC and the idiocracy. They're going to put their hands on their ears and go, la, 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 la. I can't hear you. That's not what it says to me on the television. So they seek confirmation bias, like the Asch conformity experiment back in the 1950s. You can't tell an American that their country ended unless everyone else is saying the same thing. So that's the problem. You can tell them why their country ended. It can actually even make sense. Hey, you violated people's right to life for 2.5 centuries. It's very transparent that the cops use lethal force when they blow you away. What if that was your child? Right? Are you going to care about the cops understanding the Declaration of Independence now that your child is blown away after the fact? So to be a masculine man or a good parent, you would have to topple the United States like I did in 2014. Right? But what's going to happen in an idiocracy? Everyone with a government job is going to want to keep that job. They're not going to want to hear the message that their country ended. Right? So the founders would be turning in their graves. Right? Especially if a foreign power took over D.C. this easily. Right? But there you have it. The governor of Montana has an Israeli flag outside his office, or Congress, the halls of Congress. They're doing standing ovations for a guy who is running a genocide today for a land crab to have oceanfront property. Right? So that's not on the right side of history. All of Congress is on the wrong side of history by bolstering a rogue national leader. Why is Netanyahu a rogue national leader? Well, he is violating international law by attacking other nations, something America was never supposed to do. This entire time, it was supposed to have a non-interventionist foreign policy, like Ron Paul talks about, right? Who did I make president of the United States running continuity of government? I gave you Ron Paul for transition to the new Democratic government. Of course, the USI is going to ignore that, and Ron Paul himself, in an idiocracy. Do you think he really wants to be the president of the United States? Well, hey, the military can make him the president if I want to do that, running continuity of government, because he actually understood proper U.S. foreign policy, and none of these other war hawks did. In the boomer generation or in the silent generation, Ron Paul stands out as the only person who understood that you're not supposed to attack other nations, that puts Americans in danger of blowback, it's called, right? So when you topple the Middle East for Israel and topple the seven nations that General Wesley Clark talked about in the memo, right? Well, you're doing that for a foreign country, not for America's interests, not for America's safety. No, that doesn't make you safer. Another country could blow you up with a nuke if you attack their friend, right? So that's the problem. Hey, the US side doesn't care if Americans are war fodder, right? If all of Congress is bribed and blackmailed and all of this. Hey, look, they're not looking after your public health anymore. And Americans are upset when they see Israel is getting free health care and there's a huge flood or something like this, and they're not getting very much, right? They're not getting as much aid as they would like. So when the government tries to block aid, that sends an entirely new message that, oh, the old government is not looking out for our health and safety. So that made all of America no longer trust FEMA. They no longer trust the Red Cross because, hey, just like Gavin Newsom gobbling money for the homeless, well, they just gobble aid money, right? And they're not aiding people. They're not giving the people the water that they need or the help that they need when they get this money, right? So the boomer generation is just full of corruption, left and right, whether it's to aid the public in a disaster. You can't trust the boomers. You can't trust the boomers with leadership of a nation, right? So just because Donald Trump wants to be the president doesn't mean that he should be, especially if he doesn't know the basics of his job, especially if he's compromised by a foreign power. That's what the founders would have told you. But in the idiocracy, if you give the public the same message over and over and over that this is your president, put up with it. Well, they just are. They're going to put up with the phony pandemic, and that's what it's going to show you. Even in the military, they will bend over their butt for tyranny, right? And that's what your Second Amendment was all about, to protect you from a tyrannical government. Well, hey, when do you stand up to a phony pandemic and a medical tyranny? Well, you don't. Exactly. Americans are too afraid to stand up to their own government if it's the most well-funded military. And that's the point, to make Americans afraid of their own government so that it can do what it wants all around the globe, topple any country it wants under the guise of fighting terrorism, and you can't question it as Americans, because a foreign power really does control your government. So that's the problem with America. Hey, you're dumb, you're easily manipulated, and you don't care why your country ended, and that's the hallmark of a psychopath. Hey, a psychopath will let you know that they don't care. I don't care. I don't care what you're talking about, right? They don't care about truth or fiction, right or wrong, correct or incorrect, if the United States ended 11 years ago or not. A psychopath's not going to care about the truth in the details, right? So you have a lot of things wrong with America. You had incentive to break apart the nuclear family. So I abolished child support, right? You call it child support, I call it child destruction, because the child does worse across the spectrum in life and has an 80% higher chance of incarceration. Again, the entire prison system was just cruelty under the Eighth Amendment. So your entire justice system was unconstitutional cruelty, just your torture fetish as Americans. And it took the leading sociologist and the world's smartest man to tell you this, that it was actually unconstitutional. And putting man in a cage for any reason in a jail cell is always just going to be your torture fetish as Americans. So the vindictive psychopath likes to virtue signal, and they like to control the justice system and get high on their torture fetish, essentially. But America was actually supposed to be the land of the free, right? But you built up the most incarcerated nation in the world, and all these judges and the cops, they took an oath to uphold the Constitution, but that doesn't mean they understood it. That's why they actually want cops to have a low IQ before they'll hire them. Hey, maybe their entire career, what they're doing is wrong and on the wrong side of history and un-American and being manipulated by a foreign power to make the police even more brutal than they would be like the IDF, right? Allowing the World Health Organization to censor the public on social media is like allowing a foreign power to do the same. So that's what happened on Facebook, not just the government itself, who had infiltrated Facebook from the start with ARPANET and everything else, with Mark Zuckerberg as a front. Well, it's busy collecting every website you go to on the internet. So when I banned Facebook for censorship, it was kind of a big deal. Well, they just changed their name to Meta as the deep state, right? They're not really going to go away. Hey, Facebook is essentially the government itself. So when I make FacebookDie.com a free speech version of Facebook, where the First Amendment actually does matter, look what happens. Oh, I get 10,000 DDoS attacks, and the idiocracy is not smart enough to log into the new website. They like their 1984 thought police. They like their phony social media, right? Ran by the government. And when you go on TikTok, they like to argue as the host, as a phony government actor on their TikTok lives. Well, that it's a private platform. We can't too censor you. Well, you're acting as a little mini government. So the problem is everyone likes to abuse their power. They get a high off of that abuse, right? What happens when Israel controls America? Well, they want to use America to topple these big players like Russia and China. They want to take Gaza by force for their land grab, under the guise that they're fighting Hamas, the enemy that they created themselves, as Ron Paul described years and years ago in front of Congress, right? So it's gone haywire. In Generation X, you actually arrest rogue national leaders, right? You're not supposed to allow them to attack other nations. And I ask their leader to resign as the leading sociologist, as first to lead the world army. Hey, you're not supposed to attack other nations. I would like you to resign, right? And when they refuse to resign, I arrest them with the First World Army, right? And they face the Legion. They have to fight me in the arena, to be humiliated for their poor martial arts, to deduce the morale of their troops. As I argue, only cowards fight with lethal weapons and bombs. So we do this for the children, to be good role models, right? You're not going to be a good role model as an adult if you don't stand up to genocidal leaders, all right? If you're passive about genocide, well, you're passive about everything else too, aren't you? right? And that's the problem with the boomers, right? They thought that might makes right. That's Iron Mountain philosophy. They thought you could take the world by force. Well, no one through history has ever been able to take the world by force. That's not something you're going to be able to do without the will of the people, without actually leadership like I'm doing today, right? So that's the problem. Every government's going to be butthurt if somebody is smarter than their national leader, right? If I made all your leaders irrelevant, well, hey, they're just doing a big play for you now to keep their power. So that's what's been going on the last decade, right? So voting has been marginalized, right? You have the Electoral College. You think you're voting for who you really want, but the deep state is just giving you who they want. They want to give you this phony actor or that phony actor that is more compatible with the corporations that really want to run America and the foreign governments that really want to run the United States, right? Who can be the most easily manipulated by a foreign power? Who can be the most easily manipulated by corporations? Well, that's going to be your next president, right? So the United States instead became a plutocratic corporate gynocracy. That means it's ran by the rich, corrupted by corporations, and actually a misandrist anti-male government. How do you know? Well, they cage the males for mating, which leads to population collapse in every government worldwide, and they're too cowardly to admit it to their citizens. People want to virtue signal that males are bad man, don't procreate because you're a man, right? So that's what's been going on. Subversion, asymmetric warfare. If you wanted to make it so Americans would quit making babies, well, you would give them gay propaganda and trans propaganda. That's why every state in the former United States is in decline. But Texas and Florida, it used to be South Dakota, hey, every state almost is in decline. And that's because of things like the masculine feminists, the fourth wave feminists that can be easily manipulated by trends, right? If it's trendy for all women to quit making babies with men like the 4B movement, well, that's what's going to happen in a gynocracy. And then the governments of the world are going to be fumbling over what to do. Hey, men and women aren't making babies anymore. All of these old governments are in the way of the new one, and they're just subverting the new one at every turn because they're greedy. Any woman can be bought in sociology. Take a couple walking down the street and approach with a random stranger who offers your girl $1,000 or $10,000 or $1 million to date him instead. Well, your girl's going to walk off with that guy and date him instead. So if your woman can be bought, there is no real foundation for the family or relationships. And that's what capitalism has done. That's what William Sidis, the smartest person before me, was talking about when they arrested him. He was saying capitalism itself is the problem, right? Hey, if a hitman wants to get paid for his job, right, the capitalist isn't going to argue, hey, well, he should get paid for what he does. What if killing is wrong? Well, the government kills people and it wasn't supposed to.